Hello and welcome back to another Magic the Gathering EDH deck tech idea. Today we are taking a look at Aphelia, Viper Whisperer. It is a 2-mana 1/3 with Death Touch and it has a triggered and activated ability. Its triggered ability says whenever Aphelia attacks, you may pay 2 mana. If you do, create a 1/1 black snake creature token with Death Touch. Due to the fact that she is a 2-mana commander and her triggered ability only costs 2 mana, you can be pretty sure about what you can do in the early game with her, and that's building a board of 1/1 Death Touch snakes. Furthermore, she has an activated ability for 5 mana until end of turn whenever 1 or more Gorgons and or snakes you control deal combat damage to a player, that player loses half their life rounded up. Her activated ability will be your game finisher, so this whole deck is built around building a board with snakes and at some point going for the win with her activated ability. Aside from playing a normal ramp package due to the fact that we are in green, we got a few creatures in this deck that are worth mentioning because they do not only ramp us, they also support our game winning strategy. For example, Sakura Tribe Elder aka Steve, who's a 2-mana 1/1 and you can sacrifice it at instant speed to search a library for basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped and then shuffle. Due to the fact that this creature is a snake, we do not necessarily immediately want to sacrifice it to get a basic land, because we can also use it to win the game because it is a snake, and we are also not that mad if we draw this card in the late game. We play Sakura Tribe Scout, a 1-mana 1/1 which can be tapped to put a land card from our hand into play. Definitely keep in mind that the land comes into play untapped, so we gained an immediate mana advantage, and furthermore it is also a snake. We also play Lotus Cobra, a 2-mana 2/1, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, add 1 mana of any color. Once we have used our ramp spells and also our ramp creatures, we want to bring out additional snakes. For example, Stone Coiled Serpent, an X-mana 0/0 with reach, trample and protection from multicolored, and it enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. Due to the fact that it has protection from multicolored, this card is extremely aggressive against multicolored decks, because it cannot be blocked by multicolored creatures, so definitely keep that in mind in your matchup. We wanna flash in Ambush Viper, a 2-mana 2/1 with flash and Death Touch. In the mid game we definitely wanna bring out Persistent Constrictor, a 5-mana 5/3, and at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep they lose 1 life and you put a 1/1 counter on up to 1 target creature they control. Furthermore, this creature has built-in board wipe protection due to it having Persist, so when it dies and if it had no -1/-1 counter on it, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with -1/-1 counter on it. We also play Hooded Blightfang, a 3-mana 1/4 with Death Touch, and whenever a creature you control with Death Touch attacks, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Furthermore, it also has Planeswalker Death Touch, so whenever a creature you control with Death Touch deals damage to a Planeswalker, destroy that Planeswalker. Another cheap creature that we can bring out in turn 1 is Fang of Shigeki, a 1-mana 1/1 with Death Touch. And one of our top end snakes is Sidisi Undead Vizier, a 5-mana 4/6 with Death Touch and Exploit. So when it enters, we may sacrifice a creature, and when it exploits a creature, we may search our library for a card, put it into our hand and then shuffle. One of the coolest sections in this deck is definitely its Cardadvantage package, because a few things are done different here from other decks. Because we play cards like Oran Viper, a 3-mana 1/3, and when it deals combat damage to a creature, destroy that creature at the end of combat. Furthermore, when it deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. We also play Seshiro, the Anointed, a 6-mana 3/4, and other snakes you control get +2/+2, and whenever a snake you control deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. A little bit off theme but really good in this deck is Beast Whisperer, a 4-mana 2/3, and whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. When building this deck I try to keep the creature mana curve really low, simply so that you can draw a bunch of cards by casting a lot of cheap creatures. We play Toski, Bearer of Secrets, a 4-mana 1/1 which can't be countered, is indestructible, attacks each combat if able, and whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. This sneaky squirrel does a lot alongside of all those snakes, so I definitely had to include it into this deck. We play Oran Frostfang, a 5-mana 2/6, and attacking creatures you control have Death Touch, and whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Last but not least, we also play a lot of instant speed interaction that can give us card advantage, for example Corrupted Conviction, a 1-mana instant. As an additional cost to cast a spell, sacrifice a creature to draw 2 cards. Your opponents will definitely try to interact with your creatures, and at some point you won't have the correct protection spell ready, so at least sacrificing your creature into a few cards is worth it. When talking about protection, I want to feature cards like Prowling Serpopard, a 3-mana 4/3 and it can't be countered, and furthermore, creature spells you control can't be countered. We also play Heroic Intervention, a 2-mana instant, permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. An equipment that you definitely want to attach to Aphelia is Lightning Greaves, a 2-mana artifact equipment, and equip creature is Haste and Shroud. Due to the fact that we attack with a bunch of 1/1 Death Touch creatures that we don't want to lose, we play Dolmen Gate, a 2-mana artifact, and prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to attacking creatures you control. We also play Tamiyo's Safekeeping, a 1-mana instant, target permanent you control gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn and you gain 2 life. If we don't have our Dolmen Gate ready, we also play Cover of Darkness, a 2-mana enchantment, and as it comes into play, choose a creature type. Creatures of the chosen type have fear, so they can't be blocked except by artifact creatures and or black creatures. You want to win more? You get it. You play Finn, the Fangbearer, a 2-mana 1/3 with Death Touch, and whenever a creature you control with Death Touch deals combat damage to a player, that player gets 2 poison counters. This is a great alternative win-con in this deck aside from Aphelia's activated ability, and due to the fact of Finn not being in your command zone, you won't be target number 1, even though Aphelia also makes it very tempting to target you first. There are 2 cards that allow us to go for an instant win combo with Aphelia, for example Bloodletter of Aklazov, a 4-mana 2/4 with flying, and if an opponent would lose life during your turn, they lose twice that much life instead. With Aphelia's activated ability, we make them lose half their life rounded up, and due to the replacement effect of Bloodletter of Aklazov, we can definitely take out a player immediately. A card that has basically the same effect but does it a little bit delayed is Wound Reflection, a 6-mana enchantment, and at the beginning of each end step, each opponent loses life equal to the life they lost this turn. Especially about Bloodletter of Aklazov or Wound Reflection, you should be sure to have a few protection spells ready if you want to bring those creatures out and go for the win, simply because your opponents can see that coming from a mile away, but if it works out, you just won the game. Alright guys, these were a few cards that I would play in Aphelia, Viper Whisperer. Make sure to check out my full deck list in the notes below. Let me know which cards you would add to the deck, which legendary creature I shall feature next, and then I would say, see you in the next one. Goodbye guys.